Hey, ReLive community. How are you guys tonight? It's been a few weeks since we've had a show, and I'm happy to be back with my guest, Mark Townsend. But before we jump into that, let's talk about this stupid Indiana weather. What the heck? Like, the daffodils came up, and then they're so sad because it snowed the other day, and I don't understand what's happening. In fact, somebody told me not too long ago, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, Mark, with your background, that plants that, I don't know, like come up during this time of year are accustomed to and used to being in weird, out of control climates, like the cold. So they're used to it, which I was looking at the daffodils in my backyard and they seemed happy still. Yeah. Even though it's cold. Now, one day I have this beautiful, I think it's called like a bridal's veil plant. And I've had it since last spring and it stayed outside all summer. And then I brought it in. I was like, I'm going to see if I can try to keep this alive in the house during the fall. And then I'll put it back out in the spring. Well, one day, late fall, it was beautiful and sunshiny out, but I didn't take into consideration the temperature. And I hung it outside to get some sun, and its poor little leaves like all froze. And it was so sad. So now I'm like nurturing it back to life, and it's got like just a few little sprigs on it. So it's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I'm ready. I heard it's supposed to be 80 degrees on Saturday and then rain and thunderstorms on Sunday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my son is playing spring soccer, and I don't know really what kind of a season is because the weather has made it terrible. All right, guys, let's jump into this tonight. I'm so excited. I'm going to have to be honest with you. I kind of struggled with the title of this show tonight because Mark has such a wide range of interest and so many cool things that we're going to talk about tonight. He's a very curious man, and I think you're going to see that when we go through the interview tonight. So I met Mark through my husband, and they went to school together. And I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys didn't know each other in high school. And then some interest and hobbies kind of brought you together after high school. And so it's been like 30 years that they've known each other. And then I got introduced into the picture when I met my husband. So it's been like 20-ish years. So Mark, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off and give us a little glimpse into what we're going to talk about tonight?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
And I'm so thankful that this is being recorded and not live because I don't want to make any mistakes, right? So.
Well, there is going to be a little recorded piece later, and this is live, so I mean, it's going to be fine.
Well, thank you for having me. We're going to talk about worms tonight.
Yeah, Kristen is super excited about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Specifically, she wants to make sure we hit how they breed.
Oh, we can talk about that. I wish I had drawings.
Well, maybe you could. Sketch some out real quick.
Yeah, I'll come up with some creative way to explain it. But
awesome.
That is a very interesting part of raising worms. So about me and my background, I went to Purdue, and then I worked at Purdue after college for over 24 years.
Wow.
And had several ups and downs during 24 and a half years, but overall, it was a good place to work. But unfortunately, COVID took my job. There were about 10 people in my department that were laid off in May of 20. So I found myself unemployed. But prior to being laid off, I was a construction project manager for years.
Okay.
So that's kind of what did it. Purdue cut back on construction projects quite a bit right when COVID hit to redirect their funds somewhere else. So they just didn't need as many of us. And I was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it sounds like it was kind of a blessing in disguise.
It really was. I mean, there was probably a time in my life I wouldn't have handled it very well. But it was kind of an odd relief about it and an excitement because I knew it was going to be kind of a rough period at Purdue through COVID. I could already see it coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been through similar situations before with reorganizations and things like that through the years where things were pretty uncertain. So I kind of felt relieved I didn't have to go through it.
Mm.
But at the same point, a little concerned about having to find a job in like the worst job market ever.
Right.
So anyway, prior to, or I guess during my last few years at Purdue, I had started studying a lot about gardening, self-sufficiency, self-reliance. I started raising chickens and quail and rabbits and canning and really just kind of got into that lifestyle. Homesteading, I guess, is what it's called, and learning.
Not heard that term before.
What's that?
I've not heard that term before.
Oh yeah. So like you're having a homestead back in Laura Ingalls, house on the prairie type thing. That's what people did, right? Well, I liked raising my own food and learning those skills. And I had studied permaculture a little bit, which is design science for designing your property to be self-sustaining. And it uses design principles so that you're taking care of the earth and you're returning your surplus, and things have function stacking purposes. Like, for example, your chickens can process your waste and make compost. Your compost can go in the garden. Your garden creates waste when you peel cucumbers.
Sure.
Cucumbers go back to the chickens. So, you have this cycle. So I really became pretty fascinated by the whole permaculture concept. And in all of those studies, I had heard about composting with worms.
Okay.
And you can make like worm tea, for example, out of the
Worm what?
Worm tea.
Like to drink?
No.
Because I'm like, I'm out. I am not here for that.
Yeah, no. I'll let you try some if you want, but no, it's fertilizer for your garden.
Oh.
So you take the worm castings and you put them in like a big tea bag or pillowcase. I use my wife's pillowcase for this, but so you put it in a bucket and you mix it with water and you circulate air through it, and it creates a good bacteria for the garden. And you put that on your plants, and it helps grow biology in the garden. Because one of the things that's really important about soil is that your soil has life. See, so and this is another fascinating part about worms that we'll get into. But when plants grow in soil, they excrete. I can't find the word now. Excrete. Anyway, they let off.
Yes.
They release.
Release. There you go.
Which is like a sugary substance that bacteria eats.
What was it that they release?
Like a sugary substance.
Oh, okay.
Called exudates.
Exudates. Okay.
And the bacteria in the soil eat that sugary substance. And the bacteria then poops nutrients that the plant can take up. And worms feed on that bacteria. Okay. And decaying material. Okay. So a healthy soil has an ecosystem in it. And so back to the worm tea and learning about worms. So I knew that having a worm bin to process your food waste and create fertilizer for the garden, either through worm tea or through the castings, was a thing. I was aware of it. Well, in a conversation with my aunt, she told me that my cousin Jason was raising worms.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
Interesting that you're studying this and then that.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I was aware of it. I had learned about it before, but here I am. I'm unemployed, right? And so my aunt tells me Jason's raising worms. I'm like, okay, I got to find out what this is about, because I've been wanting a worm bin anyway. So I'm talking to him. He said, so what's going on? I hear you're raising worms. He goes, yeah, I got tired of buying bait for the kids all the time. So he goes, but what's amazing is this is like a business. Because people raise worms and they sell them and they sell the castings. He's like going off on all these business ideas. And I'm like, well, I lost my job. You want to do something? So we actually, let's see, it was the end of May that I got laid off. And then April 12th of 20 is when he and I formally formed our business, which was called Cousins Compost.
Okay. So you formed the business before you got laid off?
No, after. It was August after I got laid. I got laid off in May. Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple months later. Yeah. So we were reading books and we were learning all we could and finding out how this is a business. And
right.
And then we
started. What are the business aspects of it?
Well, we sell worms to customers who want their own composting bins at home. That's primarily what we do. And we also sell castings, which is a byproduct for us. But we also buy wholesale castings and through other suppliers. So we do that. And another interesting thing about permaculture and this connection to this new business is the herb comfrey. Have you ever heard of comfrey?
Only once previous with you.
I knew you were going to say that. So,
but I bet nobody else has heard of it.
Okay. So comfrey is an herb. It grows about 3 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. And the leaves are very large. They, look like a tobacco leaf kind of. It grows up with a single stem and a large leaf. And people in the permaculture world or homesteading world use this because this plant grows a very deep taproot, 3-4 feet in the ground or even deeper. Okay. And it's called a dynamic accumulator, which means it brings nutrients from deep in the soil, accumulates those nutrients into the leaves, and brings that to the surface. So then you can let the leaves, you can chop them and drop them, or you can let the leaves die back in the fall. And then when the leaves break down, those nutrients become available higher in the surface of the soil. People will plant comfrey around apple trees and different plants where they want that fertilizing attribute.
So it's kind of like a natural miracle grow.
Yeah, well, it's even cooler than that. You can make salves out of it, and it will heal skin conditions. I'm not a doctor, so
just put that on there.
But it actually, in many, many years, it was called bone knit because people would use it to help heal bones and things like that. But it'll help.
How would they do that?
Huh?
Did it ingest it?
No. They would rub it or wrap the wound and wrap it inside of
like gauze.
Wrap the comfrey on the wound and hold it in. But we make a salve. We haven't made it in a while, but you mix coconut oil or olive oil with the comfrey, and you make an infused oil. And then you could add beeswax to that to make it harder at room temperature. And then you can put essential oils in it if you want it scented or whatever. But what's really cool, and we're going to talk about bees later too, but Comfrey Salve is very good at helping take away the pain and swelling from bee stings.
Perfect.
Yes. So it all comes around.
Yeah, it does all come around.
Yeah. So we started this worm business, and I asked Jason, have you ever heard of comfrey? And of course, he said no too. And I said, well, people do all these things with it. Let's grow that and sell that. So we actually sell quite a bit of comfrey root for people to grow at their house.
So where do you get the comfrey in order to grow it and have enough to sell? If people don't know about it.
That's pretty cool too. So I bought 25 plants 5 or 6 years ago, and I put them by some apple trees I planted.
Oh, okay.
So when we started selling comfrey, we dug up the root balls. It's kind of like a hosta. If you've ever dug up a hosta that's, got stringy roots, it's kind of in a ball, stays contained. So we dug it up and we cut like a 1 inch. Let me get close to the camera. So a 1 inch piece of comfrey root will create a whole new plant. All you have to do is cut the root off, put the root in the ground, and it'll grow.
Right.
We planted over 500 comfrey roots cuttings off of 5 plants for my property.
Wow.
And we're selling, like I said, almost every day, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day, we get orders for comfrey off of Etsy.
Okay, so I just have to know, did you dig all those holes by hand?
Yes.
Did you have a little machine?
So I had a bulb drill on a drill.
Oh, okay.
So for planting like tulip bulbs and stuff.
Yeah, I need one of those.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of daffodil bulbs I got to plant.
Well, when you're digging over 500 holes, they're pretty handy.
Yeah.
So yeah, and another thing that I learned with permaculture is this function stacking concept, right? So my other cousin, who I'll talk about later, had a really long wooden fence that he didn't like weed eating around.
Okay.
So we planted the comfrey every 3 feet on each side of the fence so that the comfrey would grow there and not grass.
Okay.
So now we're not even taking up field space to grow all this comfrey. We just planted it along a really long fence.
And what's it look like?
Well, like I said, it's a dark green plant, and it's shaped oval, big, one single stem, big oval leaf, and kind of grows out kind of like a hosta.
Everyone Google comfrey, and then you can see what it looks like. Because
you'll be amazed at how much information there is on the internet about comfrey.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up when we get done. So I want to talk about soil for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So what can I do? The soil around my house is terrible. You would think it would have been good because our house is built in what used to be a cornfield, but it's terrible. What can I do to make it better so that my plants will thrive?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it's very simple.
Worms.
Add organic material.
Like.
So are you talking about your grass lawn or where you'd want to have a garden?
Well, both.
Okay. So
mainly where I want to plant things like flowers and food.
Okay. So if I don't know much about lawn care maintenance as far as growing grass, but if you're going to have a garden, either a vegetable garden or flower garden, you're planting beds around your house, the best thing you could do is add organic matter through good mulch. Worm castings, obviously, is a good product for that. Because what you're doing is you're bringing that material in so that it can be composted in place. And add bacteria and add tilth to the soil, help drainage. If your house was built in a cornfield, it was probably treated with chemicals for years to grow the corn or the soybeans, right? So every year, that's normally what they do in these large commercial ag fields, right? Because they control pests differently, they control weeds differently. So there isn't the high biology or living soil environment in those fields. But if you look at the garden I've had for 6 years, where I've put mulch on it every year, or as it deteriorates, you'll notice that the soil is very loose. It drains well. It's rich and dark rich in color. Yeah. You can go across the street to the cornfield and compare that soil to my garden soil, where really my house was built on a cornfield too, and then planted with grass when they built the house. But you compare soil that I've added organic material to for years compared to the cornfield, and you see a drastic difference.
Okay.
Another thing is, I had a thought, but.
Well, before we go further, I only know what it is because we've talked about it before. But for other people that don't know, what are worm castings?
It is worm manure.
Worm poop.
Yes.
They poop on ReLive.
And it's the only poop that doesn't smell, at least the only one I'm aware of. It actually smells like dirt.
Huh.
Yeah.
Does it look like dirt?
It looks like little bitty worm manure. No, it's
Does it look like Cocoa Puffs?
no, and it doesn't taste like it either. It's like coffee grounds, I guess, is the closest.
Oh.
It's like ground up, but not like a fine ground, but not like powder. But if you've ever gotten bait worms and you've seen inside the bait cup, the what you probably thought was dirt in there, or ever baited a worm on a hook and had it actually poop while you baited, then yeah.
That's so gross. We have a question from the audience.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Questions? Kristen says, is it true that good soil is warmer in temperature? Do you know about this, Mr. Townsend?
No, I don't.
He doesn't know, Kristen. We'll learn about that later.
Thanks for asking, Kristen. No, the only temperature thing that I'm aware of with soil is during composting. Obviously, your compost heats up. Darker soil would be, I suppose, warmer, but it's all going to reach ambient temperature. And when you mulch over your garden beds, that is also going to help retain moisture and not let your soil dry out and crack in between rains and things like that. So mulching is a very important part of gardening. Also, that's what I was going to tell you earlier, not tilling every year.
Oh yeah, I've watched something on this regenerative
ag.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you till, you break up all the fungi in the soil and disturb that ecosystem, and you also bring seeds to the surface where they can reach sunlight, and also bury seeds that weren't touching soil before. So you actually end up planting and creating more weeds or grasses in your garden if you till every year. Okay. Where if you actually, when I didn't clean up very good last fall because I've been so busy, but at the end of a season, like when I grow sweet corn, I chop the plant off and I leave the roots in the ground. And my green bean plants, I'll leave the roots in the ground and I'll just remove the top material and compost it, so that you just leave all that biology and ecosystem where it is. And when the roots then compost in the soil, it leaves voids for the worms and the oxygen. See, soil needs oxygen too. The worms need oxygen, the bacteria, all that. If bacteria goes anaerobic, which means it's living in an environment without oxygen, it can be very, very smelly. Yeah. That's so bad bacteria or a compost pile, for example, if you're doing a compost pile, not with worms, and your compost smells really bad, it's because it's gotten too wet and it's become anaerobic and it's grown bad bacteria. That's why you have to regularly stir a compost pile to keep it oxygenated.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I like composting with worms, is because I add carbon, either, shredded boxes or shredded paper or the worm bedding that we sell. I add that in the bin and then I feed them food scraps. The worms till it, when they move around in there, and I don't have to keep the pile a certain temperature or make sure I remember to water it. I do need to keep the worms watered, but I find composting with worms so much easier.
Okay. And so how many worms do you have to have in your compost? Depends on the size, I'm sure, but
it does. And the rule of thumb, because the worms live on the top part of the composting bin, because that's where the activity's taking place, it goes by square footage. So if you have a tote, or my worm bin is the urban worm bag, it's 2 by 2, so that's 4 square feet. So a good starting rule of thumb is 1 pound of worms per square foot.
So you have 4 pounds of worms in there?
I don't. I started less than that because I sell my worms. I didn't bring them home for me, but I brought maybe half a pound home, and I just was going to let them reproduce for me in my bin. But
so they will reproduce without you stepping in the way and helping them.
Yeah, I like, sometimes I light candles and play soft music. but
I mean, like we've talked about how you have to separate them and blah blah blah. But if
yeah.
I mean, I guess nature does its own thing. Like they'll just reproduce.
So do you want me to explain a little bit about the breeding process and the
Yes.
timeline? Okay.
Yes,
all right.
It's fascinating.
This is, get ready.
But
all right.
I have another question before we go there.
Mm-hmm.
You said that the worms live on top of the compost. But do I have to stir it if I have worms in there?
No. Actually,
so I can just keep adding to it and they'll make their way up to the top.
Yes.
Because they know where the good stuff is.
There are actual commercial, very large commercial worm bins that are called continuous flow through systems.
Mm-hmm.
And they're called CFTs for short. The way a CFT works is that you start the bottom of the bin with your carbon material, and you feed the worms, and you keep adding carbon. Well, the worms, when they process all that, they eventually convert all of that to worm castings.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to keep providing them with a carbon and food environment so they're not living in their castings, right? So you add to that and keep adding carbon. Food and some type of carbon material. Like some people use peat moss. We use a product that's made out of recycled newspaper and cardboard. And then you add a food product for them.
So it sounds too complicated for me because, like, how often do I have to add the carbon and the food?
When you see the castings, when you see the bin primarily have castings in it, then you add material.
Oh,
okay. So the way a CFT works is you keep adding material, they convert it. You add material and they convert it. You add material and they convert it. And then the CFT has a knife on the bottom of it, and it moves across the bin and slices off the worm castings at the bottom, and they fall through the bottom on a screen, through a screen.
Oh. And so
then you add material on top, and then you can knife across and remove the casting. So you're a continuously flow through system of removing castings from the bottom and adding food and carbon on the top.
So if I don't have a CFT, when is the right time to get my compost and use it for my garden?
Well, there's a couple different strategies, and it all depends on your bin system. So the bin system I have at home, you didn't know this was this complicated, did you?
If I have to have a system for it, it just gets real complicated.
Well, I'm probably using, really high level technical worm terms, but my worm bin technically is a CFT. The urban worm bag is designed with a hole at the bottom, and then I feed them to the top. And when it gets full or halfway full, whatever, I can unzip the bottom and put the castings in a bucket and close it up, and I can keep filling up on top.
I know that your wife is probably shaking her head at me right now going, Rianne, it's not that complicated. It really is easy. I know that she's probably doing that.
It really isn't. But if you don't have a system where you can remove the castings from the bottom, all you have to do is remove the top layer of whatever bin you have. That'll contain most of the worms and all of the unprocessed food. Okay, remove that. Then take the bottom part, which will be your castings, empty it, and then take the product you took off the top and start your bin back over. And what I really like about composting with worms, or in general, okay, as a society, we recycle paper, plastic, glass, cardboard, all these things, aluminum, okay. But we eat a banana and it goes in the trash can and it has to be hauled to a landfill.
Yeah.
That, isn't the most pleasant for our environment, right? Well, I can take that banana peel or that apple core or the carrot peelings and I can throw them in my worm bin,
Mm-hmm.
And even if I don't garden, I can then take those worm castings and I can scatter them on my lawn if I wanted. So I've taken a product that is a waste product that has a waste stream associated with it that has cost. I think Jason told me he cut his trash down, a family of 4, 1 bag a week by feeding his worms. Yeah. I mean, you can feed them your coffee filters and your coffee grounds. Drink coffee at home every day. You can put that in your worm bin.
Well, I just do it the country way. I just open my back door and throw the stuff out in the yard. So I got like leftover cauliflower out there. I got rotten tomatoes.
I don't remember what it was, but last time I was over, there was something you were telling me.
I'm telling you, I just throw it out. I think I feed the squirrels basically, or whatever. But Kristen has another question. She's as fascinated as I am. Can you use just any old worm?
No, that's a really good question, Kristen.
Yeah. So what kind of worms do I need?
Well, there are worms that are considered composting worms. Like a Canadian nightcrawler is not a composting worm.
Is that like the kind that we find in the ground?
Yes, and that's the kind you'd probably most likely go fishing with. Would be like Walt's crawlers. If you've seen the sign around, those are Canadian nightcrawlers that he sells for bait. So the kinds of worms we sell are called red wigglers. Red wigglers? Yes.
Fancy name.
The Latin name is Asinea fetida.
All right, I like red wigglers.
Okay, I do too. Because I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, red wigglers.
That was good.
I can pronounce. So we also have European nightcrawlers, which are a little larger variety, and actually those are very good for fishing.
Some nightcrawlers are okay, just not the Canadian kind.
Right. Yes,
the European ones are good.
And we also sell an Indian blue worm, which is from India. And they're smaller, but they are voracious eaters. The Indian blue worm are the most rapid composters of all three. So the way composting worms work is they actually don't live in the soil. So you notice when I talked about what goes in your worm bin, I'm not going out to the yard and bringing soil in for my worms to live in, right?
Right.
They live in composting material. So composting worms live in the top of the soil or inside a compost pile or wherever there's decaying material, and they break that material down, or they feed on the bacteria that's eating that material down too, and that's how they work. So yes, it takes a certain type of worm for it to work.
So is there any food that they won't eat?
Yeah, technically, you shouldn't feed them citrus or tomato because of the acid. But I do know for a fact that tomato generally isn't a problem. Okay. What's nice if your bin if you've got a lot of worms or you've got a fairly nice sized bin, the worms will avoid food they don't like, or if it's too acidic, they just won't be in that area of the bin.
Oh.
Well, when the tomato breaks down or gets dispersed more or whatever, it eventually won't be as acidic anyway.
Okay.
But,
so you can still put it in there. They just won't eat it.
You're technically not supposed to feed them onions.
Oh.
You shouldn't feed them bread or dairy or meat. So this is mainly a plant.
Okay.
This is a plant-based composting, but there are a few plants that are kind of on the don't use list.
Okay. I promise, guys, we're going to get to the reproduction of worms in just a minute. But I want to know, how much does it cost me to get a pound of worms?
I think our current price for a pound of worms is $49 delivered.
Okay. Ooh,
we ship them all over the United States.
Oh. Huh. Is that any kind of worm? Can I get a mixture?
Yes, we sell each breed individually. Well, we can sell the European nightcrawlers and the red wigglers individually, and then we also sell a composting mix that contains all three.
So they all get along.
They do all get along, and they can't crossbreed.
That was going to say, can they make out with each other?
They might be able to make out, but they're not going to make babies.
They're not going to make babies. So this is a great segue into
reproduction.
Let's talk about how worms make babies.
Yes. Okay. So you ready for this?
Hold on, guys.
Okay.
Get your popcorn.
Okay. This is no longer G-rated. Okay.
No longer G-rated.
We're going to talk about
now moved into rated R.
Okay. So
hopefully don't get blocked on Facebook for all of
really
our
right
nasty talking.
Leave it to interviewing me for that to happen. But so worms are actually hermaphrodites, meaning they have both male and female sex organs. And the band, you know the band around the worm's head?
Yeah. I thought it was the neck.
Yeah, that's actually a sex organ. And they have boy, I didn't say I'm going to get it mixed up. I believe that is where the eggs come from.
Okay.
But I could have this backwards. Okay. So closer to their head is where they excrete the sperm. So is
the neck, the thick band, is that the head end? Or is that the butt end?
Yeah, that is the head end. Yeah.
Okay.
So what the two worms will do, even though they're both male and female, they have to have two to breed. So they will tie each other up, okay, and they'll line up the area that excretes the sperm with the area that releases the eggs. And then when they release, they form a mucus cocoon.
Around each other?
Have you eaten yet?
Yeah, a long time ago. I'm good.
All right, good. So then they create a cocoon. And the cocoon contains the fertilized eggs.
Oh.
Now, a red wiggler can contain 3 to 20 eggs in a cocoon. And a European nightcrawler is going to contain 1 egg, I believe, is the average.
Wait, 1?
1.
They're kind of a slacker.
So they breed much slower, yeah.
But the other one's 3 to 28?
3 to 20.
And what's the success rate on those, becoming baby worms?
Well, so that's been one of our struggles, in this business, because when you do the math, we should have millions of worms already.
And you don't.
But there's all kinds of environmental conditions, what you're feeding them, the temperature of where they're kept, how much space they have, what kind of music you play for them, I guess. I don't know. But so when the textbooks will tell you that a red wiggler will lay 3 cocoons a week. And I think they're closer to 3 eggs per cocoon than they are 20. But so three eggs per cocoon. That means that that week there's a potential for that worm to make 9 other worms.
Yeah.
It takes 6 weeks for it to hatch.
Okay.
And then I think, no, I'm sorry, 3 weeks to hatch.
6 weeks to hatch.
3 weeks to hatch. 6 weeks to become a breeding adult. So in 9 weeks from the moment that the two got together, 9 weeks later you'll have 9 more breeding adults out of that first mating, right? Yeah. So when you talk about starting with 1 pound of worms is 1,000 worms.
You want me to have, hold on, let me look back at my notes. 1 pound of worms per square foot of compost bin. So you had 4 square feet. So you want me to have 4,000 worms?
Actually, that's a starting point. You could easily,
right out my back door.
You could actually in your house would probably be best because that's where mine is.
No, not happening.
It's in my, so I go down, I take my coffee grounds. It doesn't smell.
No.
You seen, you were in my basement. You saw my worm bin, didn't you?
Do you think people are going to want to come to my house if I have 4,000 worms in my house?
I'll come to your house.
Do you think my husband's going to let me have 4,000 worms in my house?
He will.
No, I don't think so. Can they get out? Can they get out? What if if you forget to feed them? Seriously. Will they crawl out and go sniff for the food?
No.
Kristen, would you have worms in your house? I want to know. I want to know, whoever's watching, if you would have worms in your house. I'm sorry, Mark, you lost me on that. I'll have outside.
You have a very inaccurate picture of what this is like.
She said, hell no, she would not have those many worms.
Okay.
But no, can it be outside?
Yes, it can. So we also sell a product called a sub pod, and it buries in the ground, and you can reach it through a lid from above, and the worms actually can leave the sub pod and come back, but you're feeding them in this box and breaking down all the material, and then you can clean the castings out of there. And sub pods are great in a garden. Like Jason last year had his sub pod in a raised bed, and he had more habanero peppers around that sub pod than he's ever seen on plants before.
Somebody said I would, but because I'm using StreamYard, I don't know your name. So if you want to put your name, that'd be awesome. Okay, so 3 weeks to hatch, 6 weeks from that to be a reproducing. How big are they when they're born?
When they're born?
When the little worms are hatched?
Yeah, they're so tiny, and they're whitish or translucent looking. They don't get their color till they get a little larger, but very, very small. Trying to think of an example, like a mechanical pencil.
Yeah.
Click it out a couple times. Probably about that big around and maybe a couple clicks out.
Look, I have one right here.
Yeah. So they're very they're very small.
Very tiny.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us about that part? Because I cut you off on the thousand worms.
So
it's Maggie.
So the interesting thing, the way the worms mate, they can't crossbreed because they can't fertilize each other. The different breeds can't fertilize each other.
Okay.
So that's the answer to that question.
Yeah. We're gonna get to bees, Kristen. We're gonna get to bees. Don't you worry. Okay. Before we need to go to bees next.
Okay. Who's running the show, Kristen?
I mean, we got to give the lady give the people what they want.
Just for the record, I know Kristen, so yeah.
Yes.
She's.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just fascinated by all of this worm business, and I really do want to have a compost, but it's not going to be in my house. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you could put a sub pod in your garden bed or flower bed.
I can't just do a regular compost outside.
You can, but it won't work well through the winter. You'll see the sub pod stays insulated, or you insulate it so that your worms survive the winter, but things slow down a whole lot in the wintertime. Where if it's indoors, you can just keep continuously feeding them and you don't have the winter issue.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, we have talked a lot about composting worms. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you want to talk about worms before we move forward?
I don't think so, unless someone else has a question. It really is pretty simple. You get a bin, you put worms in it, and feed them.
But not just any worms.
Composting worms, red wigglers.
Yeah. Red wigglers, or you can get the mixture.
Yes.
Red wigglers, European nightcrawlers, and Indian blue worms. Are they really blue?
They kind of can have a little blue tint, but not really. They're really thin generally, and they're spazzes. I mean, when you touch the bin, those worms flip around. They just go nuts.
Kristen wants to know if we can take a field trip so she can kiss them on their lips. She's weird.
Yeah, sure.
She'll kiss them, but she won't have them in her house.
Yeah, that's odd, isn't it?
It's very odd. She likes to kiss all the animals on their lips. Okay, I want to hear more about this. It's interesting to me how now you're kind of getting into bees.
Yeah.
And nursery.
Yeah. So let me fast forward. So in August we started the worm business.
Okay.
In October, I actually got another full-time job.
Okay.
So from October, this is October of 20. Jason and I, because Jason always had another job, Jason and I worked all of our spare time growing the Cousins Compost. Okay. And, he did a tremendous amount of work on our website and finding other products to sell. And we actually worked with a company to develop our own blend of worm bedding that we call Royal. There's a company in Pittsburgh that makes a similar product for potting mix out of recycled paper and cardboard. So we worked with them to create ingredients that we only wanted in our mix. So they manufacture that for us. So anyway, a lot of projects went on. So it came around August of 21, and I just couldn't take it anymore, working constantly, working the other full-time job.
Right.
So my wife and I decided that I could go ahead and leave that job and devote full-time to Cousins Compost. And of course, actually, before 2 years or a year before I lost my job at Purdue, I had started a business doing concealed carry training, pistol training, self-defense training, and firearm safety training. So I kind of had some experience starting a business and doing some of that before Cousins Compost.
Okay.
So I had a plan in August of 21 that I would train more and or try to, and offer more classes. And I bought a firearm simulator to help me with that, where I can
Which is very awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
It really allows me to teach students a lot without using live ammunition, and also decision making for situational awareness and responding to threats. And it's a very fascinating simulator system. So I bought that, and that's what I was going to do. So fall of 21, that's what I devoted my time to. Then Aaron, Jason and I's other cousin, there's a lot here. I'm trying to make it all come together. But Aaron owned the property where we ran the worm business or bred the worms. Okay. We rented a barn from him. Jason and I did. In August of 20, when Jason and I were starting Cousins Compost, our cousin Aaron bought a flower nursery not even a quarter mile away.
Oh, wow.
With a house. And so him and his wife moved there, and he started the flower nursery, taking that over. And his first season with that would have been spring of 21. Okay. So now August 21, I quit my full-time job. That fall, worked on the worms and firearms training. Then this last winter, so January of 22 or early February, Jason is still working his full-time job and desperately wanting to move on and do something else. Aaron came to us with a business idea to purchase a bee company that was going out of business. They were retiring. Okay, they were out of Lebanon. It's named RJ Honey. So the two guys that ran RJ Honey, who were Richard and Jeff, that's where the RJ comes from.
Oh, nice.
They were retiring and selling their bee business. They had 10, 15 vendors around Boone County, Lebanon area that sell their honey. They had a good following with classes they teach. They had a website. So it really started. They have 60 hives and had a nucleus breeding program where they create new hives for people. So it was really a good opportunity. So what we thought is if we all partnered with that, and Aaron joined Cousins Compost, and Jason and I joined Ryan's Flowers, that we would all three go into business together doing all three jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing the firearms training myself when I have time.
Okay.
And then there was a fourth gentleman that Aaron was working with on bees,
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to join us with the bee venture. So we have 4 owners for the bee business.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron, Jason, and I run Ryan's Flowers and Cousins Compost.
Okay.
So I'm full-time self-employed with
Full-time.
4 different businesses.
Right.
And Jason and Aaron each have 3.
Mm-hmm.
And Gabe, who is also an RJ Honey, he has a full-time job right now. But he works 4 on, 4 off. So
Okay.
he helps us when he's off work with bee stuff. So
I thought it was interesting when you said you had 4 jobs, but 3 of them keep you busy in the same season.
Yeah, so
that's
spring,
very tiring.
Yeah, so the flower nursery opens tomorrow.
Okay.
But since mid-February, and definitely through March, has been a lot of planting, a lot of watering, and now we've been spending a lot of time getting the showroom ready.
Mm-hmm.
And March 1st is when we closed on RJ Honey. So transitioning all of their product to our location, we moved 31 hives yesterday from various bee yards where they had them to our location. We've taken on their training curriculum. They teach a beekeeping class the first Saturday of every month, and we're continuing that.
So is that in Lebanon?
That is in Lebanon still, and will be through the summer. But we've also started our own class, the first of which is going to be April 30th.
Awesome.
So spring is obviously a very busy time opening a flower nursery. Mother's Day is a very popular day. They're coming into May. And with bees, the hives are waking up. People need supplies. People want to get started. And they need material. They may want to replace hives that died over the winter.
Yeah. So what kind of material do people need? I'm guessing honey and wax.
Yeah. What do we sell or make?
Yeah.
Primarily honey. Primarily honey. But we have a lot of plans. We're gonna. I don't want to say a whole bunch we're gonna do, but
Sure.
I feel like I've been saying things that I'm gonna do for 2 years, and don't have time to do it all.
Right.
But we want to get into the flavored honey. We want to get into queen rearing, which is where we breed our own queens. And because when you're a beekeeper, sometimes your queen gets old or doesn't lay well, or maybe she accidentally dies, and you have to requeen your hive. And we'll be learning how to do that here in late June.
What do you mean she accidentally dies?
Well, let's say as a beekeeper, if I'm in my hive and I'm inspecting the hive and I put a frame in wrong and I don't notice I squish the queen.
Oh,
that could happen. Hives also swarm, and with a queen, like they're supposed to make a new queen, and then some of the hives stay back, and then the old queen with some of the hive will go to a new hive. And maybe that new queen doesn't survive for whatever reason, and you have to add a queen. But yeah, and actually the queens can begin laying incorrectly, leaving voids in the hive where they're not laying eggs. If you have a particularly aggressive hive, you can requeen it, which would change the genetics of the offspring and possibly make them not as aggressive.
Interesting.
So there's all kinds of strategies or reasons why you might want to requeen.
So did you know anything about bees before March 1st?
Actually, I studied bees pretty heavily 3 or 4 years ago. I even put stands in my yard because I was going to be getting hives. And for a variety of reasons, I pulled out of that and I never did get them. But I read books, I watched videos. I knew quite a lot about bees. I just had never done it.
Yeah.
And now I'm part owner of a business that has about 80. So it's
80
funny.
hives.
Yeah.
And how many bees are in a hive typically?
Oh, 2,000 to 5,000 or more. Yeah. Here's a really cool fact. So I did this math the other day. A single bee will only create 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey its entire life.
That's why you have to have thousands of bees.
Exactly. So when you take one quart jar, one ball canning jar, okay, and it holds 32 ounces by volume. Okay. I did the math, and it's over 2,200 bees lives to create that 1 quart of honey.
Dang. So do you have to have the quart of honey from the same hive, or can it be from different hives?
Oh, it's from different hives. Yeah.
Okay.
We would collect frames from several hives, put them in an extractor that spins the frames. After you cut see, all the honey in a hive is capped with wax after they fill the cell. So you cut that cap off, and then the honey is still in the cells. You can put that frame. There's different ways to do it, but we have extractors. So you put that frame in a extractor that rotates the frames at high speed and slings the honey to the walls of the tank and then drains to the bottom. And then we can use that frame, that foundation that came out of the hive. We can use that wax comb for next year, so the bees don't have to recreate wax.
Wow. Bees are just as fascinating as worms.
Bees are amazing creatures. Just the way they communicate, the way they breed. How
do they communicate?
Through sometimes through touching and antennas, but you've seen. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the video of where a bee tells other bees where food is by doing a dance in the hive. You've not seen that?
Yes,
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's how I communicate to Jason and Aaron now about which hive is having a problem. They'll say, which hive? And I'll do a dance to tell them exactly where that hive is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then if they don't produce but 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey, does it take, it feels like it would take a long time to get some honey.
Well, there's just several thousand bees going through their life cycle during the summer.
How long does a bee live?
Well, it varies. And it varies on conditions. But one thing that's interesting is the queen will lay eggs when the pollen starts in the spring. Okay. So she'll lay eggs, and then those eggs she'll lay, several thousand, and they'll live and die through the summer, several, generations, right? When fall comes, she stops laying. And the bees that overwinter live longer than the bees did through the summer, because she can't lay new eggs and create new bees to replenish the population. So that cluster helps keep the hive warm and ventilated all through the winter. And they feed on whatever honey stores they have after fall, or we feed them a candy board made of sugar through the winter, and then they'll stay like that. And then in the spring, when it warms up, the bees will go out and forage, and if they start bringing pollen back, the queen knows it's time to start laying again.
My head is about to explode. We should have called this science class with Mr. Townsend.
Science class. There is so much I need to learn about worms and bees.
Yeah.
But that's what's fun about this, about all of this, right? So I never knew where life was going to take me. I didn't. I didn't.
None of us do.
When people told me I wasn't going to turn out to be anything, look at me now. I'm a worm farmer. Right?
Look at you now.
Yep.
So
beekeeper. I've had some very stressful, high responsibility jobs in my career. I've been very unhappy at times. But when I started learning about more of the natural environment and wanting to provide for myself, it was just brought so much more reward to me, and I felt more in control of that. Right, like when we go to work every day, we're not in control. We're going to have a job the next day. But when you grow a garden, then you're in charge of that food. You get to create that for yourself. If you can't go to the store and buy something, you have something you built, right? And learning how to start plants from seed and, you know, all these skills that go along with it. I just became fascinated with it. Well, now look, and that's also why I like firearms training. I mean, I want people to be self-reliant. When you're in a dangerous situation or attacked, the police aren't likely with you. The only person you have to rely on is yourself.
Right.
And teaching that mentality to be responsible for yourself is something I really enjoy talking about and teaching. So I lost my job. I had to figure something else out. And I went back to these skills. I went back to the things that I'd been learning about for years. When I was preparing for this interview, I thought, well, you know, we can talk about worms, and bees and flower nursery and all that stuff. But I guess if I could encourage your listeners on a deeper level to do something in their life to make their life better, one would be always be learning.
Right.
Find something you like that you can learn how to do. And if you enjoy that thing, maybe there's a way to monetize it, or there's groups that you can join. There's people that you'll meet that'll lead to other opportunities. I mean, I felt like when I lost my job that there was people that I had built relationships with that would help me and
absolutely
and all that. So that's just part of life, you know, getting in the car every day and going to a job. Well, a lot of us don't get in cars anymore to go to jobs, right? A lot of us work at home, I imagine. But anyway, you know, add that to your life, the learning, the relationship building, and you never know where it will lead you. I've met so many fascinating people through these businesses that have led to other things. The guy who makes our worm bedding told us about a guy who's processing food waste into a dry composted material. The guy's literally taking cafeteria waste and waste from Chipotle and Kroger and throwing it through this digester. And it just so happens what comes out of his machine is excellent worm food. So we are also working with him to possibly market this worm food and do that. So you just never know who you're going to meet and where that's going to lead you.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how a small conversation with your aunt has turned into this crazy world of yours?
Yeah. And on our website, if you read about us, that's the story we tell.
Awesome.
Is that conversation with my aunt leading to this.
That's really cool. Well, Mark, we are just over an hour. Is there anything further before I have you tell us where we can find you? Like if I want to order some worms, how do I do that? I want to know real quick, this nursery, this flower nursery, is that like where I go and buy flowers to plant in my yard, or is it like where I go and buy flowers to make a bouquet?
It's plant in your yard. Okay. These aren't cut flowers. These are we have a lot of hanging baskets. You know, with flowers. We have dahlias, geraniums, a few hostas. We just got ferns in yesterday, I believe.
And that's Ryan's nursery. And where's that located?
That is between Crawfordsville and Waynetown on 136. So it's west of Crawfordsville, just a few miles.
And opening day is tomorrow, guys. So
that is tomorrow.
Go check them out. What are your hours tomorrow?
9 to 5.
9 to 5.
You'll find all the information about Ryan's Flowers on Facebook under Ryan's Flowers.
Is it Ryan's Flowers or Ryan's Nursery?
Ryan, you're right. It's Ryan's Nursery. Yes.
Okay.
I'm new, so I got the name wrong. Yeah, Ryan's Nursery. I believe.
That's okay.
So, and then Cousins Compost, we are cousinscompost.com.
Okay.
And RJ Honey, we are rjhoney.com.
Awesome.
And the my firearms business, which is moving pretty slow the last few months because of everything else going on, that is freedomfocusllc.com.
And you guys, if you have any interest in that, the simulation thing, my husband and I went and kind of played around with it. It was really cool. Really cool. So, okay. Mark, anything else you want to share with everyone before we say goodnight?
I don't think so. If anyone has questions, please, if anyone has questions from tonight or anything I can help with, just please contact me.
Yes, he's available. He'll be watching the chat or the comments on this, and we can, I don't know, do you have an email address that they can get in touch with you, or how?
Well, it's pretty easy. I'm pretty much Mark at all of these businesses. So I'm Mark at Cousins Compost. I'm Mark at RJ Honey. I don't have a Ryan's Flowers email address.
Well, because it's Ryan's Nursery, so you need
to. Right, Ryan's Nursery. I don't have a Ryan's Nursery email address. And I'm also Mark at freedomfocusllc.com.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for watching. If you're just catching the replay, remember to do #replay. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Mark, to our guest, and come back next month for another fun show. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.